we're being recorded. My name's Katie Lacey. I'm the senior planner at Mass Housing Partnership, and we have a packed agenda today. If you guys just want to throw in the chat where you're from and your name and your affiliation, that would be great. We have speakers from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, MHP, and CHAPA that will be joining us. The chat will remain open, but we're hoping everyone can sort of try to write down their questions. We're going to have plenty of time at the end. If you have an urgent question and you want to put it in and we can answer it, someone will. But we like to kind of keep a lid on the chat to the extent we can. And then we will deal with, also we'll be making note of those questions. So if we don't answer it, don't feel you have to answer it. Anyway, my name's Katie Lacey, and we got everyone's adding their chat. And I'm going to just turn it right over to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and Chris Kletchman, who is maybe you can clarify your title, to get us started with all the info they have. So have at it.
Thanks so very much, Katie. It's great to be here. Hello, everybody. Happy to be talking to you kind of from this side. We've been working on MBTA Communities since it was signed by Governor Baker in January of 2021. I'm happy to kind of kick us off. Let's go to the next slide, Felipe. I'm happy to kick us off. I'm the director of the Livable Communities Division here at EOHLC. These are some of the folks that make up our 3A team. Let's go to the next slide. What I'm really happy to talk to people about and just kind of highlight are really the successes of the program. And I'm just thrilled. 140 communities, that's 79% of the 177 have adopted zoning that's intended to comply with Section 3A. That's fantastic. I mean, that is just wonderful. 135 of those have submitted district compliance applications. We have 110 communities that are compliant or conditionally compliant. That's just fantastic. And I know you all have been doing such amazing work on the ground, and you're all to be congratulated. For those of you that haven't received your compliance, you may be working with our team and be in conversations with them about how to address any concerns that we have. We've also been through that optional process of pre-adoption reviews. And over the course of the program, we've done 97 pre-adoption reviews, and each one of those receives written feedback from us. Some of you are frequent flyers with pre-adoptions because you may have tweaked your zoning to go back a second time. So thank you for taking that effort to do that. That's no small feat. Adjacent small towns still have until December of this calendar year to get their zoning done and submit their applications. We do have 15 communities that are currently non-compliant and about 22 adjacent small towns that are still working on their zoning. Some adjacent small towns are actually have already been done their zoning and they're already compliant. So congratulations to those small towns. So again, I just want to kind of give overall, everything is going very well. If you read the press, you may hear about court cases. We've been quite successful with court cases. First in January from the Supreme Judicial Court, making a decision authorizing the Attorney General and saying the law is constitutional. And then in June, we had Judge Gilday dismissed unfunded mandate lawsuits from about 10 communities that had applied, and those have been dismissed. So we're feeling very, very good about where we are right now with the program. And so I know people are tuning in to hear from our team about kind of what's next and what do you have to do for your ongoing responsibilities as an MBTA community. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Emma Snellings, to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. So for those of you who have achieved compliance on this call, congratulations. That is awesome. And for those of you who are under review or still planning to submit your district compliance application, we look forward to working on your review. So for those of you who are compliant, you've got your determination of compliance letter. You've taken a deep breath, hopefully, and now maybe it's time to change your zoning. So here we are. Now, I've cut out a portion of a determination of compliance letter that is in everyone's. And basically, it's summing up section 7210 of the regulations ongoing obligations. And so this is just a reminder that goes out to everyone that you can't just adopt a 3A district 1 year, get compliance, and then go back the next year and take it all away. So we do expect to see these zoning districts stay on the books. And just to note, if these bullet points look slightly different in your letter, the message is still the same. The language has varied a little bit over the course of the last year and a half of determinations, but the message is still the same. So as you're considering changes to your zoning, you will need to let HLC know about those changes, and we will then confirm for you that you're staying in compliance. And I'll just talk a little bit about that process. This process, as it stands right now, I'm going to describe what it is currently. And I just will say that after that last deadline at the end of the year passes, we may be looking to streamline this process, and it might change a little bit. But if that happens, we will reach out to every single community and let you know about what the process now looks like. So this is good for now, and it's good until you hear about any changes. It is how we are operating currently, but it might change in the future. Okay, so you're contemplating some zoning changes. When do you need to tell HLC about your zoning changes? Well, ideally before you adopt the changes. So we envision this happening kind of similar to how our pre-adoption reviews occur. We would love to see the language of your zoning amendments before you adopt them, so that if we do see some concerns with continued compliance, we can bring them to your attention before you adopt. Now, we know that town meeting season is very busy, and so please, even if you miss the mark with getting us the language before you adopt, please just let us know as soon as possible. If you have concerns that what you're doing might change your unit capacity, land area, or gross density measurements, please reach out as soon as possible, as soon as you know about these changes, so that we can help determine whether the changes are going to affect your compliance status. So how do you tell us about your changes? Right now, the path is email. So please email EOHLC3A@mass.gov. We would be looking for that final language of your zoning amendments, or a warrant article if it has all the language in it, explaining the changes. If you are making changes to your map, we would also be looking for that map. And so what do we need to know? So we are not asking you to resubmit a district compliance application at this time, and we're not asking you to, in most cases, to edit and resubmit a compliance model. So if these are small changes to the language, we will be editing the compliance model that you submitted for district compliance. And if your numbers change, we'll then let you know what your new determined, required values are. If your map is changing, if you are adding parcels or taking away parcels to your compliant district, we would like to see updated GIS shapefiles for those districts. So generally, no compliance model. We don't need to see updated shapefiles if you're not making changes to your map. But if you are, we would like to see new shapefiles. As you probably know, our review, one last point, Felipe. So as you probably know, our review of your zoning covers more than just your compliant district. It covers your entire zoning code. And so we are in casting a broad net and seeing your zoning changes that could impact your 3A district, right? So if you are adding new requirements for special permits, we'd like to see those, changes to, we're seeing a lot of change with floodplain districts. We'd like to see those so that we can determine whether or not it affects your 3A district. And then finally, just two quick examples. We are already receiving changes to zoning, and we are already making determinations of continued compliance for communities. I didn't see them in the chat. I don't know if Winchester is here, but they recently did it, right. They emailed us before they adopted some changes to their affordability requirements. We reviewed those changes. We reviewed those EFAs, and we replied via email because they were minor changes that didn't affect their unit capacity, their land area, or their gross density. And we, affirmed that if they adopted these changes, they were going to maintain their compliance. Pretty straightforward. I did see Lexington in the chat. And so my other example is Lexington. Lexington achieved compliance, went back to town meeting, and made some more major changes to their compliant district. And so they let us know of those changes. They sent us an updated compliance model and GIS shapefile, because it was pretty major changes to both the language and the map. We did basically an entirely new review, and because some of their values, like unit capacity, did change, we reissued them a determination of compliance with those new values. And as we review these changes, your compliance status will not change. So you are just like when you applied an interim compliance and you stayed in interim compliance until we returned a determination of compliance. If you're in compliance, when you send us your zoning changes, you'll stay in that state until we come back to you with a determination. Okay, we can go to the next slide. The one exception for not submitting a new compliance model is a whole recodification. And so that we are treating those a little bit differently. If you are throwing out your zoning code and completely rewriting it, we will be looking for a new district compliance application, an updated compliance model, and updated GIS shapefile. So we're kind of looking for that, since we won't be able to just edit what you submitted for district compliance. So if you're going through recodification, please reach out, let us know, and we can help you through the process of resubmitting all of your documents to redetermine compliance. But again, as we do the review, you'll stay in the same status as you were. Next slide. And so then finally, just before I end, I want to note that whichever 3A staff, this is like pulling back the curtain a little bit on the 3A team, whichever 3A staff emails you your determination of compliance is most likely the person who did your review. And so, the official notice of zoning changes to go to EOHLC 3A at mass.gov. But as you're working through any processes, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to a specific person, your best bet is to start with the person who sent you your determination of compliance, just because they'll be familiar with your district. If you know anyone else, or if you have anyone else's email, feel free to start with them as well. But if you haven't had much contact with the 3A team, the person who emailed you your determination would be a great place to start. So, okay, so that's all I have on alerting us about zoning changes and what we'll do with that information. And now I'm going to pass it to my HLC colleague, Ali Sabatino, who will present on inclusionary zoning in 3A districts.
I'm just going to jump in, host prerogative here. I know there's going to be review questions for Emma, so jot them down and we will get to them at the end. The other thing is, we've already had a few questions. Will the slides be available? I think we can do that. I'll talk to Emma about whether we post them on the Housing Toolbox or, but the recording will be available. So anyway, back to Ali.
Thank you. I'm Ali Sabatino. I'm the Lip Hop coordinator at EOHLC, and I've worked with a lot of you before. I was looking at who was here. So a lot of this will be kind of a refresher, but we just wanted to go through it to make sure you understood kind of what the next steps were to get, if you do have inclusionary zoning that requires affordability, to get these units ultimately on the subsidized housing inventory. So what is LIP, or the Local Initiative Program? Basically, it's a program that encourages locally driven efforts to create affordable housing. So what does that mean? And I'll go through that in much more detail as we go through the presentation. But basically, LIP fund falls under Chapter 40B. And it's really, the program really encourages and requires the municipality to be engaged in the development throughout the project. before it actually even comes to the local initiative program. So there's two types of LIP projects. And so you can think of LIP as kind of an umbrella. And under LIP, we have two programs. We have the LIP Comprehensive 40B, which sometimes people refer to as a friendly 40B. And then we have the Local Action Unit application, which is what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation. So I'll go into that in more detail. So what are some examples of LIP projects? We have, we really run the gamut. We have large and small projects. There's rental, there's ownership, new construction, nonprofit like Habitat. We have first-time home buyer buy-down programs. We really do everything. The LIP, we're popular and we're growing. And I really think that's a testament to the, municipalities that have really been out there going through town meeting, getting inclusionary zoning passed, and the requirement of affordable units in developments, and also CPA funds, things like that for affordable developments. I really believe it is the communities that are really pushing this forward. It's why we're popular and we're growing. So what is the local action and application process? So the key requirements here are the application has to be signed and submitted by the municipality. It really shows that the municipality is engaged in the process and supportive of the process. There has to be an evidence of local action. So I'll get into it in more detail in the following slides, but basically local action is, for the communities that have inclusionary zoning by right, it would be a site plan approval is your local action, or even a building permit if site plan approval isn't required. But other, examples of a local action would be, CPA fund grant, a town meeting action, things like that. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on the next slide. The application also requires an affirmative fair housing marketing plan and lottery. Basically, we want to make sure that, these units are marketed far and wide. And that's a major requirement of the application. And then we also require a regulatory agreement, which is a long-term use restriction. It requires that the affordable units are affordable in perpetuity in most cases. Okay, so what are some examples of local actions that are eligible for our program? So zoning-based approvals, that's, like I was saying before, a special permit would be required for us as a local action if there was affordability in the development. Again, as of right approvals, which is what, obviously you're here for today, that would be a site plan approval or, a building permit. We do allow conveyance of publicly owned land. And then, like I said before, CPA funds, granting those funds would also qualify as a local action. So fair housing framework, we do have an obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. It is required that basically we provide opportunities for people that are protected under fair housing laws. And this is through the affirmative fair housing marketing plan, which I'll get into in the next couple slides. So what is that affirmative fair housing marketing plan? We do require, a description of marketing and outreach. So where are you going to market? Where are you going to outreach? Sample ads, publications, where are you going to, what newspapers are you going to put this in? Are you going to put it on social media? We want to see how far and wide you're going to market these units. Application materials. So what is the actual potential applicant going to fill out? What does that look like? Informational materials. How are you describing your, project, your development? Eligibility requirements. Are these, as an example, are these units for people who are earning under 80% of area median income? And then lottery and resident selection procedures. How are you going to, market these units? How are you going to run the lottery? How are you going to actually select these tenants? We want to make sure that it's done, in a fair way, obviously. And if you are requiring a local preference, we have to have a clear description of what preference is used. We do allow up to 70% local preference. If the municipality can prove the need, And I just wanted to make a note here for local preference. For rental units, we do only allow local preference for the initial lease up. After that initial lease up, there's no more local preference. So I just wanted to highlight that because sometimes communities do have a question around that. So obviously the subsidized housing inventory, the whole reason for this is because you ultimately want the units to count on the subsidized housing inventory. So basically for the subsidized housing inventory, it generally counts if it's developed under an eligible state or federal subsidy program. And so for this case, the local action unit program would be that eligible state subsidy program. We don't give any money out, obviously, but we do consider the subsidy our technical assistance. So if you have any questions, you want to talk about the application process, anything like that, we're more than happy to have, a meeting with you, a call, whatever it is, to answer those questions. It is a requirement to have the units are affordable to households at or below 80% of area median income. They have those long-term use restrictions, like I was talking about before. For the local action unit program, we do require regulatory agreements and are subject to an affirmative fair housing marketing and resident selection plan. I just did want to note in this section that a lot of communities think that as soon as we issue, a local action unit approval letter and sign the regulatory agreement, at that moment, the units are automatically counted on the SHI. But there actually is just one more step. So once we do, issue our approval letter and sign the regulatory agreement, the community has to then put those documents and a few other things into Margot LeClaire, and I have her email at the end. She basically, she's our Fair Housing Council here at HLC, and she oversees the SHI. So that's kind of the next step that you have to take once you do get approval for the local action unit application. So what's counted on the SHI? A lot of people also have questions around this. So for rental units, and this is only for rental units, if at least 25% of the units are at 80% AMI or below, or at least 20% of the units are at 50% AMI or below, then all of those rental units count on the SHI. However, if there's fewer than that, only the affordable ones will count, and that's only for rental. And then for ownership, only the affordable units count on the SHI. And so here's our contact information. Rieko Hayashi, she's the LIP director. She's usually does 40B stuff. And then my contact information is here. And then Margot LeClaire, like I talked about before, for any subsidized housing inventory questions. So that's the end of my presentation. And I'm going to actually hand it back to Katie. Thanks.
Hey, everyone. We did get one interesting question, and since it looks like we're going to have time, I'm going to ask. So we had one question: can the local initiative include an incentive towards veterans and seniors housing? And we don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but I don't know if you wanted to just talk about that a bit, Allie, or say follow up with you directly, or what?
Yeah, I'd be happy to follow up directly because I think there's some ins and outs in it. And so it just might be easier if, we had a conversation about what the, what the actual question surrounding it would be, if that's easier.
Yeah. The other thing is I'm going to take the opportunity to announce that we haven't put it all together, but on October 20th, MHP will be offering in-person training for municipal staff that are responsible for doing the monitoring for their municipality. Liz Rust is going to be teaching that, and registration information for that will be coming out shortly. It's an amazing opportunity because Allie provided a fabulous overview of what the LIP program is. But then when you get there, you're like, wait, how do I get them on the inventory? How do I determine, if that's your responsibility as the municipality, it's actually quite a bit of hands-on work. So that will include exercises and the whole 9 yards. I am going to share my screen. here. Okay. I am going to talk a little bit about MHP has an opportunity for this year called the Expanded Technical Assistance Program. So many of you received technical assistance through MHP's Technical Assistance Program to attain compliance. And that program is still alive and kicking. If anyone has not figured out their district or achieved, applied for compliance or figure that out, you can apply to us. We have a stable of very qualified consultants who've worked on, at this point, we've worked with 130 of the municipalities to get something together. So the mapping, the modeling, but we still are very fortunate to have some funding available that is available for this fiscal year. So that's through June 30th, 2026. But we are leaving the applications open, so feel free to apply. So I'll just walk through what the program scope and eligible activities are. I don't know, Emma, can you just throw in the chat the link to the application? That would be great. So you can always use this money for district compliance. And in fact, we're working with about 12 communities now, adjacent small towns, that are at this point aiming for a fall town meeting and needed help. And they kind of got their act together earlier this spring and applied. So we are working with those. So that's just the basic. Where should the district go? How many, figuring it out. So we have a number of those communities. We also have a couple communities that, for one reason or another, missed the deadline of July 14th for these would be adjacent communities and commuter rail communities, but they're like, we're going to give it another try. We're going to come back this fall and try to get something figured out. So we are working with those too. And that is our highest priority, is just getting everyone over the compliance hurdle. We have a couple communities that have heard from HLC that what they've proposed is halfway there, maybe not all the way there. Sometimes they need to actually really do a little work. Those communities are they're considered in interim compliance. Anyone from HLC can correct me if I'm wrong, but we will be working with them to sort of get that squared away. As Emma said, that may be a role transitioning over to the HLC's compliance staff. We know for a fact it will not be with MHP because this money ends the 30th of June 2026. But in the meantime, if you want to modify or expand your district and it's within this fiscal year and you'd like some help, please apply. We still have funding. We'd love to hear from you. We have a couple for instance, I'll just give you an example. We have one community that embarked on a recodification of their entire zoning. They knew this was coming. They applied for compliance. I think they attained compliance. They knew they had this recodification coming, and they are working with us to make sure that all aligns, that their recodification and their compliance are in sync and that they will stay in compliance. So the third category is community or developer engagement or training pertaining to the district. Many communities, particularly the adjacent small towns, haven't really ever permitted anything that would multifamily ever. We are hearing from communities that are saying that, and they're saying our boards don't really know what that means, what we should be looking for. We have this bylaw, but we don't really understand it. So it's going back and sort of helping those communities out. The boards, getting them prepared. We have application guidelines for 3A communities, what communities will be looking for in the application. We have another community that wanted to do a certain amount of outreach, a write-up about their district that they could send to give to developers because they actually want to have development in this district. So just describing what's there, sort of a marketing piece, which I think is great. We are completely open to financing a new or revised economic feasibility analysis. So let's say you're into this year and you're like, we went for 10%, but we're really thinking we might be able to get 12% affordability. We can help you figure that out. Whatever product gets done will also have to be submitted to HLC to make sure it aligns. We also would accept anything to do with if you want help getting systems set up for monitoring and compliance for your local action units that hopefully you will be creating through in your 3A district. And if you want to do this in advance, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like I'm working with one small community that said, we've never had inclusionary zoning. Now we have this district. There's a 10% requirement. What does that mean? And again, we're going to have a training available, but we also will do sort of a hands-on one-on-one with your community to help them get set up to deal with that. And then finally, if there was something you left on the cutting room floor last year, for instance, like, we really did want to look into a mixed-use multifamily district, an MMUD. And as some of you know, you can do that. It's a complicated process, but it will count towards your units. We haven't heard from anyone wanting to do that, but that is on the table. Again, it's a project that would be done this fiscal year. So the time window is short if that is something you're thinking about. But again, anything you left on the cutting room floor, if you want to go back to it, this is your chance. I'll just really quickly say what is not eligible. This is a program that is really targeted at big picture compliance, getting everyone compliant, getting districts compliant. We've had some inquiries about site-specific planning or pre-development projects in your district, which sound like fabulous projects, but unfortunately, they're not eligible through this program. Fiscal impact analyses. What is this going to mean for our town long term? That's not eligible either, partially because it's just a big cost and we're unclear about the accuracy and the benefits of it. And similarly, utility type comes under pre-development, really, utility studies for your district. Which we know there's often, you've got your zoning done. There may be other challenges ahead. There are other programs that will help you deal with that, but this is not that program, unfortunately. So that is it for this program. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. We still have funding available. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your application. So that is it for me. And I am turning it over to Monica from CHAPA, who is going to talk about, and Will. Hey, Will, I didn't see you. Project-focused advocacy work. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Folks can let me know confirm that they can see my slides and not all of my notes for a cheat sheet. So give me 1 second. Can folks see the slides but not my notes?
Good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I will pass to Will to introduce ourselves and what we're going to talk about today.
Great. Thanks, Monica. And I'll pass it right back to you in a few minutes. But really great to be here with you all. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, and it's great to see you all again. My name is Will Radigan. I'm CHAPA's MBTA Communities Engagement Manager, so I've been working very specifically on the issue we're discussing today. And first, before I get into what I do, it's a quick overview of CHAPA for those that don't know us. We're a statewide nonprofit. with a mission to encourage the production and preservation of housing affordable to people with low and moderate incomes, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and community development. Long mission, but to get more specific, what I've done for the last year and what CHAPA's been doing for the last 3 years is run our technical assistance program for community engagement for communities seeking to comply with 3A. At this point, we've supported over 80 communities as they've sought to come into compliance, and we have about a 95% passage rate for those communities. So we're really proud of that so far. What that's looked like in the past is that we've had 3 main ways of supporting communities. The first is that we've run monthly cohorts that many of you have been a part of, where planners from similar communities share information about their community engagement strategies, what's working, what's not, and root each other along as they go through this difficult process. We've also had monthly learning sessions on topics having to do with housing development and community engagement, and addressing many of the common concerns folks hear from their constituents when talking about new housing. And then we also do direct support with community engagement, whether that means designing materials or coming in and doing presentations and information sessions in communities. And in this last stage, we're really leaning in on that. So for those of you on this call who haven't passed 3A yet, if you haven't worked with us already, we'd love to support you through these last 3 months of the process. At this point, no application is needed. We have capacity, and we're happy to work with anyone that's still seeking compliance by the end of this year. And as I said, at this point in the process, we're available to do a lot more direct community outreach and engagement work. And that's free of charge to communities. So you can simply reach out and we'll get to helping you as soon as we possibly can. But for the many of you that have already complied with 3A, we are also thinking about what we can do next to further the cause of housing affordability in Massachusetts. So what we're looking at next is expanding our TA program that we ran for 3A to cover other pro-housing policy reforms. And whereas our program in the past focused specifically on town planners, we're looking at opening up this model to include select board members, planning board members, and city councilors who are all involved in the process of getting pro-housing reforms done, but may not have some of the technical knowledge that planners have. And we're going to have a similar model that we use for our 3A TA program, where we have cohorts of people from similar communities working on similar issues. We have learning sessions on community engagement and common concerns associated with housing that will have experts in the field. And then we'll do some of the direct community engagement support as well. This is really an early stage idea right now still, but we're looking at gauging interest from local officials who might be interested in participating. So if those folks are in your community, please reach out to us. We really want to hear feedback on this idea and get an idea of what kind of interest there is out there. And just for a bit of timeline, we're probably looking at opening an application for that program sometime late this fall with a launch early in 2026. So that is my update on 3ATA in the past and what's next for us. And now I'll turn it back to Monica Keel, who will talk a bit about some of the other things you can do moving beyond 3A in terms of trying to advocate for certain projects in your 3A district to make sure they move through as quickly as possible. So I'll turn it to Monica.
Thank you, Will. As he said, my name is Monica Keel. I am the program manager of the Municipal Engagement Initiative at CHAPA, Citizens Housing and Planning Association. So Will is our MBTA Communities Engagement Manager, but he still falls under this Municipal Engagement Initiative team that we have here at CHAPA. And I know my colleague Lily Link is on the call too, so special shout out to her. But thank you all for being here today and for having me here to present about our Municipal Engagement Initiative and some work that our coalitions have done in the past. I see a lot of familiar faces on this call, so hello to all of you. So as you all probably know, local support can really make or break new housing development, yet many communities in Massachusetts lack a strong pro-housing advocacy group. Our team, the Municipal Engagement Initiative, was founded in 2018, and our main objective is to work with residents on the ground to change the conversation and support existing local efforts in favor of more affordable housing. Each city or town has its unique challenges, so we really focus on bringing together what we call big tent coalitions to support affordable housing production. And so this is what that big tent coalition can look like. This is a non-exhaustive list, and we hope that you see yourself on here. And if you don't, we are always happy to add other kinds of identifiers on here. But I think the main objective to show in this big tent coalition is that we are really reaching out beyond the usual suspects. So not just reaching out to folks that are already in the housing field, but also reaching out to environmentalist groups, fair housing groups, civic groups, cultural groups, because a lot of their work and their priorities intersect with housing because everybody does have a stake in housing. And we really want to bring as many diverse voices into the space together so we can really get and dig deep into what can we do to bring more housing and more affordable housing to a community through our coalitions. The communities we work with have reached out to our program via our MEI community application. And if a community is accepted, they are considered an MEI community. And we have two types of MEI communities. We have our MEI full communities and our MEI light communities. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference. So again, in the Municipal Engagement Initiative, we have our 3A technical assistance, but we also have this direct coalitional work that we do. A lot of the work that the coalition has been doing in the past couple of years, of course, has been surrounded by 3A because that is in all of our minds, but they also work to determine longer term goals and other kinds of projects that they're looking to support. So the main difference between these two programs is the time difference that our team is able to provide that technical assistance to a community group. So in our MEI full capacity, and on that program, that's a year-long intensive collaboration between the municipality, CHAPA, and the emerging stakeholder group. And the stakeholder group is something that we help our coalitions put together in our planning processes. Another thing we do with our full communities is meeting with the steering committee regularly to plan monthly meetings. The steering committee can come from someone who helped apply for the technical assistance, but they can also be someone who was identified by the municipality as someone who is going to be a very strong leader for the coalition. So it's people who are already showing up to those local meetings. They're probably already a trusted voice in the community. So people feel that they can already trust them. We're at CHAPA, we're this outside agency, we're a statewide agency, as we said earlier. And so when we're able to lean on those steering committee folks, that's how we're able to build better trust in the communities we work with. In our traditional sense of moving forward with the MEI full communities, we host a launch meeting with those stakeholders that we've identified. And again, the stakeholder list is something that's an ongoing process. We are always asking ourselves, who is missing in the room and who do we need to invite to get as many voices into the room as possible? And so at that launch meeting with the stakeholders, we're going over data sharing. So talking about the age of the housing stock, how much are people paying for their housing costs? How many people are cost burdened? What is the makeup? What's the age typology? And a lot of that information comes from MHP's Data Town source. We also talk about key barriers and opportunities in the community to housing, and we end with a group discussion and brainstorming on how to tackle those issues. Our coalitions also develop mission statements, web pages, mailing lists, and policy goals, so any way that they can keep folks involved and informed in their work, and ongoing support to educate and empower advocates on topics of their choosing. And that can be up to a lot of things. That can be zoning reform, accessory dwelling units, Community Preservation Act. If folks are interested in it, if we are not the experts to present on it, we're happy to find someone who can come in and present on that if that is something that the coalition is interested in. And now I want to talk a little bit about our MEI Light program. So many communities need help getting their efforts launched without requiring that ongoing long-term assistance. So our MEI Light program is intended for community groups that are already underway, but they just require that additional support, that little push. So this is typically a 2 to 3 month or so process of that more intensive support. So it can look like the traditional MEI community model, but we're also happy to work in a consulting capacity if that is something that the community is looking for. And so after that 2 to 3 month support, the community graduates. Just like our full communities, after we have finished with the year-long intensive program, they graduate. We've recently started hosting graduation ceremonies, so that's been really nice, but we've also created these tailored graduation packets. And so that's giving folks as many resources as needed to host hybrid meetings, how to reach out to guest speakers, how to reserve a space, how to flyer, where are the best places to flyer. The goal is that our coalitions are self-sustaining after that graduation. But as I've said, of course, we are always still here for any kind of one-off assistance as necessary. And again, the MEI Light communities, just like the Fulls, they can host a launch meeting with their stakeholders, but we can also provide technical assistance or work in a consultant capacity. I showed this image here of our MEI Light launch in Northampton in the summer of 2023. That was one of my first MEI Light launches when I started in this role full time. So it's really nice. As you can see, we're in person in the town hall. It's a place that folks are already used to coming to, and it was a really great meeting that day. And so now I am really here to talk about how a coalition can support a real affordable housing project. And the example I'm coming with today is from our Greater Newburyport Housing Choice Coalition. And this included members of the communities of Amesbury, Newbury, Newburyport, Salisbury, and West Newbury. And I know I saw some folks on the call from Salisbury, so shout out to you all up there. So this was CHAPA, our MEI's first regional coalition. And it was supported by the YWCA in Greater Newburyport. Their board actually identified the need for a pro-housing coalition in their region, and they saw the application when it was released, and the timing was just perfect, and they applied. I also put their little coalition logo right here. That's another thing we do for our coalitions. And some of the accomplishments they've had. Over 30 housing articles were published in the Newburyport News. Some of those were written by myself, but most of them were written by volunteers in the community. And we actually heard from a lot of community members in the coalition and outside of the coalition of how helpful those articles were. They were educational, but we also shared a lot of personal stories from seniors or people who were recently displaced from the area to talk about their housing concerns. And so that also really helped change the conversation. This was a community we supported from October of 2023 to about January of this year. And so another great thing that we did was we co-hosted the North Shore Pro Housing Summer Social in August of 2024 with a couple of other community groups in the North Shore area, as well as Abundant Housing Massachusetts. And the Lieutenant Governor was actually our keynote speaker for that. 4 of the communities in the coalition have passed their MBTA districts, but the one that has not is an adjacent small town, so they are not out of compliance. So all of the communities that can be in compliance are in compliance with the law. They also supported Rowley in their MBTA Communities advocacy. A couple of folks from Rowley actually reached out to the coalition because, as folks probably know, there was some back and forth with that Rowley did not pass their district the first time. But we met with them. We had about a 2 to 3 hour meeting in their public library, just talking about what our coalition was able to do to support their MBTA districts. And our coordinator spoke at a couple of their community group meetings, and we invited them to our coalition as well. So we kind of so it's a regional coalition. We kind of adopted Rowley into our coalition. So that was really nice. And they also formed a couple of working groups. We had a legislative and projects groups, and a couple of their major projects were working on an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, as well as a tax exemption status for affordable housing developers. So you all know what happened with the ADUs. They are by right now, and the tax exemption status did pass as well with the language that the coalition came up with. And another thing I wanted to highlight is that the beginning of this year, they were also able to hire a social media intern through a sustainability grant that my team was able to provide to them. And that intern made some really great graphics for them on their Instagram account and other social media sites. But now I want to talk about the big project. So the Brown School redevelopment project for adaptive reuse. Again, if you are in the North Shore, Greater Newburyport area, you have definitely heard about the Brown School in the past 20 years that this has been being talked about and discussed. But I also want to say, when it comes to a coalition, the easiest way to build support is to have a project that folks can cling on to have those public meetings, to hear about and to get involved. That is a great catalyst for your coalition. So a little bit about the history of the Brown School. It's a 3-story brick building located at the corner of Milk and Lime Streets near downtown Newburyport. So it's a pretty walkable area over there. And this is a picture of the Brown School right here. It was constructed in 1924, and at that time, 4 local schools in the area closed, and all of the students moved into the Brown School. A historical report from 2022 actually noted how different the building had changed over the years. So keeping in mind, because I know sometimes that is something people say when they are against a housing project, of people are afraid of change, and rightfully so. Change can be extremely scary, but it is a natural part of our lives. So in 2014, the city conducted a feasibility study and considered a relocated youth services program to the first floor of the building, and they were hoping to use the second and third floors for housing, whether it be affordable, market rate, senior housing, artist lofts, or offices. So the youth services did move into the first floor of the building. In 2015, the Brown School Educational Reuse Subcommittee came out with a report recommending that the building be used for transitional, non-educational uses to offset operating costs. There was an RFP, a request for proposals, issued in 2017, but the city was not super happy with the results, and so they did not move forward with any of those. The city did write a housing production plan in 2018 that identified senior housing as a need because they had a lot of seniors who were aging in place and needed a place to downsize, but still wanted to remain in Newburyport. In 2021, the Newburyport Youth Services relocated from the Brown School because there was a heating issue, and the building then became vacant in 2021. After a couple years of that vacancy, there was a request for expressions of interest issued in 2023 for creative adaptive reuses to the site, and 4 responses were received for that. In the following year, in 2024, so our coalition is well underway at this point, and that is when they issued the request for proposals for the Brown School, and that specifically asked for proposals for senior housing development. Earlier this year, the Affordable Housing Trust allocated $450,000 to the project to help with the feasibility and help to make it more affordable for the community, because a lot of people did identify that there is a need for more housing, there's a need for senior housing, but there's still a need for affordable housing as well. So like I said, there was a request for proposals in 2024. They received 3 responses. A developer was selected and a development agreement was reached in March of 2025, so earlier this year. And so where did the coalition itself get involved? I'm sharing this photo. This was the last in-person meeting I attended in January of this year, and these are some of the folks in our steering committee. But the Greater Newburyport Housing Choice Coalition looked at and considered all 3 plans in response to the RFP in 2024, but they decided that they liked the YWCA proposal because it had the most units. The proposal was for 41 units, and it had the most and deepest affordability. And of course, the YWCA is a local developer to the area. Unfortunately, the city did not feel that that plan was feasible, and there were some concerns from community members about density and parking in that area. So in fall of 2024, After all three plans were being considered, we hosted a public educational meeting during that process. This was a lunch, so around this time, a lunchtime meeting that we hosted for the public to educate folks on the history of the Brown School, as well as what all of the responses to the RFP really meant. Our coalition sent 25 letters in favor of the YWCA Greater Newburyport proposal. Like I said, unfortunately, that was not the one that was selected, but I still wanted to highlight all of the great work that they did. And our coalition members spoke at various public meetings and shared an informational packet with all committee members and city councilors. So as I said, the YWCA proposal was not the one that accepted, but the one that the city did select. Our coalition worked with the developer to bring deeper affordability and more affordable units to the development. So the initial proposal was for 29 units, 8 of which would have been affordable at 80% of the area median income, which is a little over $92,000 a year. So keeping in mind, this is senior housing. So these are people on a fixed income, and $92,000 a year is a lot on a fixed income. And 21 of those 29 units were to meet market rate with 43 parking spots on the development, because as I said, parking was a concern by the community. So after our coalition met and worked with the developer, the final plan that was accepted was still the same size, 29 units, but now 15 of those 29 units are affordable at 60% of the area median income, which is around $35,000, around $70,000 a year, and 14 units are going to be affordable at 30% of the area median income, which is around $35,000 with 32 parking spots. So as you can see with the accepted plan, the building is now 100% affordable, something they told us that was not feasible to do, which I'm sure many people have heard do, that 100% affordable will not work in their community. But they also brought down the parking, because again, this is senior housing in a downtown walkable area. So in all, at the beginning of this, in March of this year, the land was declared as surplus by the city, and a development agreement was signed in March of this year. So overall, this was a really long process for the city of Newburyport, with many meetings, committees, and RFPs issued in the past decade or so. But this work would not have been possible without the advocates who truly never gave up on this project. And many folks in the community attribute the coalition to this plan being accepted and passed now. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for this time today. If folks want to talk a little bit more with me about if they are interested in applying to be an MEI community, I have office hours Thursdays and Fridays, Thursdays at 1 to 3 p.m. and Friday mornings. You can sign up with this link, and I'm happy to put it in the chat, but you can also feel free to send me an email, and I've put Will's email here as well. Thank you all.
Okay, guys, so we put a lot of information out there today. So we do have time for questions, but let's just recap what we learned, because one of the main goals here is who to talk to about what as you move forward in this post-compliance world. So Chris gave a great overview of where we're at with compliance. We're actually coming to the end of this, which is super exciting. It's an unprecedented effort that states around the nation are envying. So I think everyone needs to feel really good that you were part of this. Then we heard from Emma, who this was really important, and the compliance staff. Be aware there is a compliance team still up and running, very active at HLC. And as we go forward, and changes do happen to bylaws, you're going to change other parts of your bylaw. Will it affect your district? There will be someone at HLC there to help you through that process. Like, wait, are we still going to be in compliance? So I think the overall message was get in touch before. Earlier is always better. And anyone from HLC can chime in on this. But I thought that that was extremely useful information. Like, you're done, but you're not really done forever. There's nothing else you need to do, but if you do change your bylaw, you've got to get in touch with them. Allie talked a lot about the local action units. Just keep in mind, inclusionary units are local action units. They are eligible for the SHI. You may be saying, wait, how do they get on the SHI? What is my job for the municipality to take care of them? And that is Allie's job. You reach out to Allie and say, help, we now have a project that has affordable units in. We've never had that before in our town, or more units. What is going on? And again, MHP will be offering an in-person, in-depth training on that on October 20th. More to come on that. And then finally, CHAPA talked about, you've got your district, what happens with specific projects in there, how can you support them, who in your community can support them. So that's who you call if you need that group of advocates in your community. So we do have time for questions. Oh, and I am going to just, I see Chris is unmuted, but I am going to just take a minute to share my screen really quickly to let you know, oops, it's not moving forward. I just want to show to the end of this. We call MHP's community assistance team. We do offer a lot of services, site feasibility and pre-development work, RFPs for these are actual sites, town-owned sites for that you want affordable housing, advocacy planning and zoning assistance for increasing density or changing. And then we have a very robust support for municipal affordable housing trusts. And again, tomorrow we're having another webinar on the Housing Opportunities on Public Land program with the HOPL program. So that is tomorrow at 10 a.m. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm hoping Chris or someone from HLC might have something to say, or if you have questions, please chime in. No questions? Any second thoughts, Emma, Chris?
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for convening this webinar and having all these great speakers. Monica, what amazing work that CHAPA has been doing, and thanks so much for previewing, sharing, especially that project. I think that's sometimes really helpful inspiration for some of the advocates on the call to see it might take 10 years, but stuff does get done. And I think, Katie, the way I just frame 3A, Section 3A or MBTA Communities, it's in the law. So it's not until it changes or until it goes away. It's part of the Zoning Act for Massachusetts, and so everybody has to continue to comply with it. And that's why we're trying to highlight exactly how do you do that if something changes. And then also you did mention national interest. There is national interest in this program, and many researchers are reaching out to us. And so as we look to, in the coming couple of years, we'll be wanting to, one of the reasons we want to get your map changes is because we're trying to develop as accurate as possible our GIS of the mapped 3A districts, because again, many researchers are looking to look at what we've done, and then they'll be looking at the development. And something that I did not say, but I think is important, we currently have about 5,200 units in the pipeline in 3A districts. That's a lot of development. And we're in a financial situation right now where interest rates are higher than they were. If this were 7 years ago, in like 2018, we might have 10,000 units. But anyway, we are seeing development come online in these 3A districts, and that's some of the information that researchers across the country want to track. So thanks, Katie.
Oh, just a quick question. Will HLC at some point be tracking that? I mean, it would be very difficult to be tracking every municipality, what's getting developed.
So we ask municipalities, and so if you're in a planning division or you're not in a planning division, but you have contact to your town hall, we do want to know about development that's occurring in 3A districts. All our compliance letters ask people to send that information to us. So if you do have development going on, please do alert us and let us know. We also crowdsource lots of that information. But what we're talking about in the pipeline is anything that's been a public document in your community. If a developer has, provided a set of design plans to your planning board, whether it's a pre-application or a formal application, that's what we want to know about. Anything that's been publicly shown.
Okay, we're getting some very specific questions. Also, we've turned off the recording, so if you had a question but you were a little nervous